there's a whole lot of active management going on with our noxious animals in the backcountry. I mean, it's ironic that we have this trout fishing industry and they're basically river rats, but we have protected our trout. And so coming back, we have this dilemma, as you know, of we've got this great hunting tourism industry going on now. The average hunter from overseas is spending $25,000. I'm sort of moving slightly off the question. So DOC are very good about handling noxious animal control.
I mean, the issue of feral animals can be totally emotive, and that's the case in the case of the brumbies in the Australian Alps. I mean, we call them feral horses, most of us. Just to deal with other pests, though, I mean, the funding required to actually manage the pests becomes a real challenge in some scenarios, which is part of the reason why park use fees are collected in Australia, because it contributes to the management of your natural values from in your parks. But the Brumby issue that you raised, Philip, has been one that the park services and conservationists are absolutely committed to getting rid of feral horses, but because of media and popular culture and the Man from Snowy River, there's a huge community that's saying they're our culture. The Brumbies are the culture. They're the Man from Snowy River's horses, and there was a massive rally in Sydney last week where all the people opposed to culling feral horses actually went up and paraded around Sydney, 3,000 people against control. So the Park Service is actually putting in place a series of control mechanisms, which includes trapping, ground shooting, and other methods, but they've got huge opposition from an emotive community.
It is a problem. It is a serious problem. Wildlife management is one of the big issues we have to deal with. And I remember last year we had the situation that we had to close up one valley because of ice climbers. It was just a perfect winter last year. It doesn't happen every year, but last year was a perfect winter for ice climbing. And then we had to close up one of these valleys because of problems with deer. So in fact, it is a problem.
I don't know how many of you guys hunt, but I do. Having lived in Alaska a long time, I'll have to say I've taken moose, and I also hunted when I was a young lad for elk and deer down in Oregon. But when I say down in Oregon, I guess it's a long ways north of here. But in any case, Alaska's management, it is a state that's the highest priority is its game management in a lot of ways. Fish and game takes priority over practically everything, and sometimes politically it's not the best, but it is what it is. And we have right now there's a high predation of predator control of wolves and bears that are being taken out. I'm not entirely in favor of that, but it's something that the state does to manage it so that other animals can be there for the hunters that in larger numbers. But just as a perspective, not all hunters are bad, and they can be very good at doing following the same rules. In fact, a lot of the hunters are hikers and climbers. So, being one myself. So, just to put that in perspective.
Yeah, there was a shit fight, but the reality was that there's so many users going up there that there wasn't really much choice about it. There was a design competition between a bunch of architects to actually come up with the most community acceptable facility. That building cost, I think it was $80,000 if I remember rightly. But once it's in, I mean, now people go up there admiring it. It's a composting system, and it's in the winter you obviously can't see it, but it's become totally acceptable and recognised as suiting the purpose. There was certainly a lot of challenges around it early on, but the benefits were, I mean, it was a case of selling the benefits and actually putting it in place, and it's really unobtrusive, which was the benefit of having a couple of hills around the place.
It wouldn't work without government assistance. The reason is because it's big issue is to reach the Kyoto Protocol or whatever it is, all these climate goals. and Austrian government has started with European Union huge funds for. And to start projects like this, national parks are always a good thing to start with. And it was tremendously supported for the first 4 years. Otherwise, it wouldn't have begun. So it's very clear, no chance without additional money from funds from government. But now it's the challenge to turn it over to the private sector, and we are trying to do it step by step, and it's the goal to privatize it totally, and without money from government.
My belief is that the New Zealand mountaineering activities are reasonably static. There's a bit of growth in the club, but sometimes some of that is driven by insurance. So the activity in the backcountry, as we go, the international growth is considerable in going to places like the Tongariro Crossing, the front, what we call the front country. It's flattish, and I think Mike may touch on that this afternoon.
Can I just make a quick comment on Nepal, which is that, and I think this possibly applies to lots of other parts of Asia too, and underdeveloped destinations, is we're seeing a huge increase in domestic Nepali tourism. And this is something that we see as a really good move, people getting out and seeing their country and understanding their country, and that's inspired by leaders such as we have here at this conference, and awareness that there's lots to get out there and see and love. And so that's perhaps we're behind the curve with the more developed countries, but it's something I think to be really encouraged.
I think we're seeing something slightly different, because we're seeing the growth in international visitors using front country of national parks, but we're also seeing a growth in domestic visitors and local people actually using parks. And I do believe it's partly because there's more activities for them to do, and there's some diversity in the sorts of things they're doing. But what we are seeing is a decline in the use of the backcountry. So we're seeing less people doing long distance walks, for example, and less in supported situations, and a reduction in backcountry cross-country skiing.
In Austria, domestic visitors are slightly growing. It's part of the discussion that in Austria, the situation where Austrians normally they go to these places in Turkey and so on, which are pretty dangerous at the moment, and so many Austrians stay in the country.